Hey, look! It's another FPS. Gore Ultimate Soldier was developed by a studio called 4D Rulers, which was founded in 1997 by Joe Huning and his brothers, Rick and Nick. The three brothers owned an ISP and advertising business, and with the skills and funds acquired from those, they began their plan to enter the video game industry. By the middle of 1998, they had assembled a team of skilled modders and began working on Gore. Things didn't go totally right, however. According to Joe Huning, due to unforeseen delays with programming and various obstacles with the game's engine, they started running out of resources and the team's morale was dropping. Deals with the bank and the publisher were also a constant pressure on their backs. Still, in 2001, two multiplayer test versions were released to the public. The core gameplay was almost all there, but several assets were different from the final version. Weapons looked different and chunky, particularly the pistol, and bobbed back and forth in a really annoying way, so I'm glad that was changed. Safe falling distance was lower and the damage was higher, and there was also a zoom function that could be used regardless of your current weapon. In June of 2002, the final game was finally on store shelves. The game takes place sometime near the end of the 21st century. The world's global government is falling apart under pressure from a criminal organization known as Mob, so an elite military force known as the UMC is formed. They waged war against Mob, but they kept growing stronger and stronger. However, the UMC developed some highly advanced training technology, referred to as the meat machine. Fresh recruits turned into veterans with mere weeks of training, and the tide started to shift in the UMC's favor. Of course, Mob decided it was time to do something about this. But who cares? The single-player campaign's plot gets so utterly ridiculous, and the characters are so cheesy that you can't help but shake your head in amusement. The UMC personnel is composed of military stereotypes, while Mob is composed of anarchist kiddie stereotypes. The game is focused on multiplayer, but let's take a look at the single player first. It starts with a simple obstacle course. The game quickly teaches you about two of the game's mechanics. The first is localized armor damage. Picking up some armor doesn't just fill an arbitrary armor meter. It instead fills one of a few different arbitrary armor meters, protecting the respective body parts until it's destroyed. It's hard to tell the effect in first person, but you definitely notice it when fighting armored enemies. The other is stamina. Running and jumping around drains your boost stamina meter. As it begins to drop, the player character will start panting and moving slower. If it runs out, you drop to the ground for a bit while you catch your breath. It's a potentially interesting idea, but it feels a bit out of place in a fast-paced arcade shooter like Gore, and the heavy breathing is kind of annoying to be honest. Still, you can safely ignore it for the most part. The game doesn't waste time until dropping you right into the action. You spot a mob jerk throwing knives at you, so do him a favor and shoot him in the head. But wait, there weren't supposed to be enemies here. Apparently mob soldiers hacked into the meat machine. Makes sense. Take a few more steps and you face your biggest challenge yet. I don't know what happened with this net. I'm pretty sure that this doesn't happen in version 1.0. The single-player campaign is made from several multiplayer maps, so I'm guessing that the map was changed in some patch and the single-player wasn't adjusted for it. Oh well. From here on, it's mostly smooth sailing. Some nerd who calls himself Optic Nerve stole some data or something? Either way, your mission is to catch him. And occasionally do seemingly completely unrelated things, like searching for and destroying mob weapons, and then finally shoot him in the head. Or the body, whatever goes. It turns out that just killing him isn't enough. The meat machine was infected with a virus that took control of its functions, and the soldiers connected to it are basically stuck inside, so now you're diving in again to try and take down the virus from within. Makes perfect sense. That's exactly how computers work. things get a bit spooky. The gameplay is still the same as it was though. Run around, collect weapons and ammo, shoot mob operatives in the head, find the exit to the next level. Most of it is very standard stuff. One mechanic that separates Gore from other shooters is exploding pickups. Weapons, ammo and armor are actual physical objects, and physically bothering them too much will cause them to explode. In single player, this is more of an annoyance than anything else, but in multiplayer it has some interesting ramifications. Gore's arsenal is one of its best points. The weapons feel nice to shoot and look relatively cool and all futuristic like. The flamethrower is a bit weak and the regular shotgun is kind of underwhelming, but it makes up for it with its outfire, which projects a shield around the user. Then there's this. This quad-barreled shotgun is just plain awesome, so this game gets a passing grade when it comes to weapons. What doesn't get a passing grade is the level design. It's clear how the levels are just recycled from multiplayer. The third level is even separated into two identical color-coded areas. The enemies are practically brain dead and simply chase you around, so it's easy to lure them into a corner for easy pickings. You will mostly be up against only 4 different characters for the entire game, so them being so different and recognizable from one another actually ends up making the repetition more obvious than if you were up against faceless soldiers. Your allies don't fare any better, so do them a favor and shoot them in the head. Eventually you'll reach the end boss and it throws a curveball at you that is so ridiculous that, you know what? I think I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it for you. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Indeed, fantastic. Shakespearean. As for the multiplayer, I'm afraid I can't give you a proper analysis. This multiplayer-focused game is 15 years old, and never once did I try the multiplayer mode. It originally used GameSpy, but that died in 2014, so you need to use an alternative like Gore Spy, which isn't much more alive. Supposedly there are still people playing. Of the 3 servers with players in them, one was password protected, one only had 6 AI skeletons with miniguns, and the other only had this lonely observer. I'm not sure it was even a real person. This is why proper bot support is important. The gist is that there's 2 factions fighting against each other, each with 5 classes. Some are faster but take less damage, some are slower but can handle more pain, and some shoot people in the head from a distance. There's also a variety of game modes. Aside from the standard deathmatch and capture the flag, there are also 3 tactical modes, where players only have 1 life each round. Extermination is simple: annihilate the other team. Assault has 1 team defending an objective, while the other team tries to plant a bomb in order to blow it up. The third is escape and infiltration, where 1 team must protect a VIP from being assassinated by the other team. Later patches also added a cooperative mode where players could go through the entire single-player campaign together, and a duo mode, which is simply a 1 vs 1 deathmatch. In 2008, 4D Rulers released Gore Special Edition for free, an updated version with new graphics and gameplay tweaks, such as stamina dropping much faster and being a bigger annoyance. And also a couple of in-game advertisements and an overly expensive premium package, because one of the classes isn't available to free players. While the official site is more or less completely broken aside from the forum links, you can still find it on places such as File Planet. And yes, it does include the single player, although it has a few minor annoyances such as using the multiplayer HUD. But hey, it's easier than tracking down a copy of the retail version. Ultimately, Gore apparently sold about 60,000 copies and got an average critic reception. The game sure had a lot going for it, so why did it fail so badly? The most obvious answer is that it simply couldn't compete with the other shooters in the market. By 2000, Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament were already dominating the multiplayer market, and Unreal Tournament 2003 was already in the sights of FPS enthusiasts, and indeed was released 3 months after Gore. There were also a lot of big releases around that time that had already settled into their place. Soldier of Fortune, Medal of Honor, Counter-Strike, Serious Sam, Tribes, Red Faction, Halo, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Command & Conquer Renegade, Jedi Knight. The competition was brutal to the wallets of gamers all over the world, and Gore was totally sandwiched between them. There's also the possibility that it was just too little too late. It was stuck in development for a long time, and while what it does competently, it failed to stand out from the more popular games. Joel Huening, the founder, was a frequent poster in the forums, and has a few interesting posts regarding his experiences in the video game industry. In one of them, he explains the problems he had with the banks and Dreamcatcher, the publisher, but also admits that he should have been more discerning with the partners he picked for his projects and didn't push the publisher enough to give them more development time. Interestingly enough, he mentions that the team actually wanted Gore to be a single-player focused game, which is the opposite of the final game. 4D Rulers also developed 2 other games. The first is Secret Service Security Breach, a budget FPS published by Activision Value in 2003 that was completely slammed by both critics and gamers. Not a surprise, however, since the entire project was made in less than 5 months. The other was Patriots, A Nation Under Fire, published by Silverline Software in 2007. It got slammed even harder, which again isn't a surprise since, according to Joel, he lacked the proper team and proper resources to produce a quality game. After this, he started a successful real estate business, but still had ideas for video games and wanted to someday put them into practice. In 2013, with a new company under his leadership, the Fun Pimps, he set out once more in search of success in the video game industry. Would this be the game that the die-hard fans of Gore were waiting for? And so, his new project, 7 Days to Die, was announced to the public. Wait, 7 Days to Die? That sounds kind of familiar. Hey look, it's another open-world zombie survival crafting game. In early access.